Hello everyone. In this video we are going to continue our discussion about plants, and more specifically we are going to focus on the movement of water and nutrients across the different organs of the plants. So going back to the topic of phloem, we will add this slide to the previous material. So we have already covered the phloem in a previous video, and we have discussed the role of phloem, or the main role, which is the transport of the products of photosynthesis, so the sugars, from the producers, which are the leaves, to the different parts of the plants. So in addition to this role, we are adding another role of the phloem, which is the electrical signaling communication between the different parts of the plants, especially the widely separated organs. So you can think of the phloem as equivalent to the nervous system of animals, so allowing rapid electrical communication between organs that they are separated in the plants, like the leaves and the roots. And by this, we can consider the phloem as a superhighway for systemic transport of macromolecules. And by saying systemic transport, we mean the whole plant body, so the whole structure of the plant. So by doing that, we are integrating the functions of the whole plant. So having the phloem can be considered as circulatory or nervous system that allows communication between the different parts of the plants, allowing them to integrate their functions together as one single organism, rather than being just isolated or a group of cells that without any type of communication. So imagine that a leaf needs more water or nutrients. So through the phloem, these signals from the leaf, the demand of the leaf, will be transmitted to the root in order to absorb the nutrients or the water needed by the leaves, and so on. We have already covered this in the previous video, the types of transport in plants, and I'm just showing this slide as a reminder. So we already mentioned that we have two main types of transport. Before going to the types of transport, let us remind ourselves about the keywords. So we have the word apoplast. So apoplast consists of everything external to the plasma membrane. So as you can see here in this figure, we have the plasma membrane, this orange layer here. So this is the plasma membrane. Anything outside of the plasma membrane, so these areas shown here in this beige color, so these areas outside of the plasma membrane are considered the apoplast. Therefore, transport taking place outside of the plasma membrane is called apoplastic route of transport. So this involves the cell walls and the extracellular spaces. So as shown here in this fuchsia arrow, we have apoplastic transport taking place outside of the cell membrane. Okay, then we have what we can call protoplast. So the protoplast is the living part of the cell, so it composed of the cytosol and all the dissolved materials in this cytosol. So the protoplast of one cell is connected to the protoplast of the next cell and to the one after that. Why? Because we have these channels in the cell wall which are called plasmodesmata. So the protoplasts are connected and they are known together or collectively as symplast. Okay, therefore transport taking place through the symplast is known as symplastic route. So symplastic route is a continuous transport from one cell to another through the channels connecting the cells, which are the plasmodesmata. Okay, So when it comes to the absorption of water and minerals, this happens by the root, and more specifically the root tips. So we have the root hair and these tiny hairs covering the roots, where the absorption of water and minerals will take place. Before we start talking about the absorption of water and minerals, we have to highlight something. So the roots are present in the soil. In the soil, there are many materials that the plant may not need. For example, they are heavy metals. They may be even nutrients more than the need of the plants. So because of that, there must be a way for the plant to selectively uptake the materials that they need while not taking the others. So if we think of apoplastic transport, this apoplastic transport takes place through diffusion. So movement of nutrients from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. So that includes, or that means movement of nutrients or materials from the soil, from high concentration in the soil to the inside of the plant. As you can see, the diffusion does not allow this selective transport. This does not allow the plant to selectively uptake what it needs. Also, it's important to go through these keywords. So we have the epidermis. So epi means the outer, so it's a prefix meaning outer. So we have this layer, the outer layer covering the roots. Then we have the endodermis. Endo means internal, because these are contained within the plant tissues. And then we have what is known as cortex. So cortex, as you can see here, all the layers in the root or the stem that is below the epidermis and outside of the vascular cylinder. So here we have the vascular cylinder, which is, in this case, we are showing here the vessels, the xylem. So consider this as like a circle, and here all the tissues outside of this vascular cylinder and below the epidermis will be considered as cortex. Okay. So we have what is known as endodermis. This is surrounding the vascular cylinder, so shown here in red, and as we say, it surrounds the vascular cylinder like that, and this allows for the selective passage of minerals into the vascular tissue. So as we have already mentioned, the selective passage is important, and this is allowed by having the endodermis, as we will show in the next slide. So what happens is actually it's like that. As we said, if the minerals and water are following the apoplastic route, they will move outside of the plasma membrane. This does not allow the selective transport, because selective transport involves crossing of the plasma membrane. Maybe we'll highlight it in the previous slide. So selective passage means crossing or movement across a plasma membrane. So as you can see, the apoplastic pathway does not allow this. So because of that, we have what is known as Casparian strip. This is part of the endodermal cell wall. So it's a waxy layer in the endodermal cell wall, shown here in purple. So if the minerals are following the apoplastic route, they will move till they reach the Casparian strip. So they cannot cross it. It's a waxy layer. It's a block in the way of the apoplastic route. So what they need to do, they have to cross the cell wall and the membrane. Can you see it here? That shown in yellow is the cell membrane. So they have to cross the membrane and move through the symplast. So they will follow the blue arrow, and since they will cross the membrane, this will allow the selective transport. So the endodermis or more specifically the Casparian strip in the endodermis, regulates the transport and the needs of minerals from the soil into the plant selectively. So what will happen next is that once the minerals and water are here in the living part of the cell, which we call the protoplast, they will move to the cell wall of the endodermal cell. So once they are here, they will follow the blue arrow to the cell wall of the endodermal cell. I will tell you why is that in the next text. So water and minerals now enter the tracheids and the vessel elements, which are these. So these are the tracheids and vessel elements of the xylem. And here we have the endodermal cells. Remember that the xylem cells are dead at maturity. So since they are dead cells, they don't have plasma membrane, but they have cell wall. Because of that, once the minerals and waters are in the living part of the cell, in the protoplast, they continue their way back to the cell wall. So now here you can see they are in the cell wall of the endodermis, and from that cell wall they can cross the cell wall of the xylem, and now they are inside the xylem. So as you can see, we have now followed the movement of minerals and waters from the soil. We have explained what generates the selectivity, so having the endodermis and more specifically the Casparian strip. This forces the apoplastic pathway to switch to symplastic at the final step, which is crossing the endodermal cell, and this ensures the selectivity because the plasma membrane is a selectively permeable membrane. So now the plant will selectively uptake the nutrients that it needs, and then once it is inside the endodermis, it will cross the cell wall of the endodermis. From the cell wall of the endodermis, it will go to the tracheids and the vessel elements of the xylem. Once it is inside the xylem, it is now easier to transport these minerals and water through the other parts of the plant. So going back to the previous slide and adding the information we have learned in the previous slide to this one, we can see that there are apoplastic or symplastic route. The minerals and water can follow the apoplastic route through the cortex till they reach the endodermis. The endodermis is forcing the apoplastic route to cross the cell membrane. Now it is following the symplastic route because it is crossing the membrane, and after that it will cross the cell wall of this endodermis to the xylem, and by being in the xylem it can be easily transported.